Hello and welcome to the Zoom Test Kitchen. I'm Jeff Widgren, your host, and we meet and gather here every Friday afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern. Been doing this for almost 3 years now and have built up a really great community, if you will, of great, friendly, helpful people, lots of fantastic knowledge and experience and so forth as well, from Zoom only ways of doing and accomplishing things to additional event driven productions that also depend on external solutions in addition to Zoom as well. So, but today is it's a big day in the sense that some of those external requirements are being alleviated in the sense with the introduction that we're going to get exposed to today, called Zoom's. You guys don't prefix it with Zoom. I can't not say it without saying Zoom's production studio, because Zoom owns it, they made it, and so forth. So, anyways, I call it the Zoom production studio, but it's a production studio inside of Zoom natively, and so we will all get exposed to what its possibilities are, how we can configure it, how much we can do, how much we can't do with it. You know, where is that threshold, or where professional production, additional equipment and so forth is necessary, but how much can actually be accomplished within Zoom with a produced event as well. So super exciting stuff. I published an article about this yesterday, and I was just thrilled when I saw it. Sam Kokajko is here, and he had done a demo 2 days ago, I think, right? Live demo of it. They released it yesterday and for replay. And when because I couldn't join the live event, I saw the replay, and I'm just like, holy smokes! I wish I would have seen the live event so I had more time to write an article. But needless to say, it really got my mind going very strong in the sense of the opportunity, because I think there's a great play for this kind of solution built in, and it's quite unique at that, which we'll learn about as well. But our guest today, we have Andy Carluccio from Zoom headquarters. Thank you, Andy, for joining us. We also have Sam Kokajko, and we also have Jonathan from Zoom. Hello, guys. So these are our three named. I'm guessing there may be some other Zoomies in the meeting. I'm not 100% sure, but needless to say, if you are here, thanks for your support as well. But we are. I think we're in for a demo. Are you going to show this off again, Sam, or are we going to primarily talk about what has already been shown off?
Yeah, I think I've got parts of it up and running with us today, which I can kind of refer back to when we get into some questions about it, if I have something I need to go show. But I'm probably not going to go do the soup to nuts demo that we have. We do have that available, like you said, in your article. I know you linked to the recording of it. I know Andy also posted on a couple different platforms with just the actual, it's about a 20-minute demo itself, which is taking you through the entire back end and kind of maybe a little bit of a speed run, but hitting all the different things that you can do with it. So I think we're probably more in question territory today.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing that's great about this crew in particular. It's not their first time here. Although it's been a little bit of time, they thrive on Q&A, and they'll Sam is one of the most unfiltered guys I know, and he just tells it like it is, and you'll know you got the truth when you heard it from him. Doesn't mean they can tell you everything. Obviously there's projects and so forth that can't yet be talked about, but this is a first solid go at outwardly showing and talking about production studio, which we if you're paying attention at Zoomtopia, I was there in person for the first time. It was announced. It was a pretty quick announcement, but out of all the announcements, this one by far has been the quietest. It has been very quiet along the way. So it's thrilling to see that it is being shown and talked about and so forth. I think it's always a developer's toughest time, quite honestly. They want to go out the door and be proud of their work, and us consumers of their releases and hard work can sometimes be quickly critical of it as well. So I would encourage everybody to really recognize what it represents, recognize what it doesn't represent as well, which I would put that in the category of those in the production field as a threat. I don't think it's that at all. And I think it'll be a really helpful tool at that. So anyways, Andy, do you want to kick this off
Sure.
from your team?
And I think it might make sense to start right with that last point you made about where does Production Studio fit into the bigger picture of production tools that Zoom offers. We have a variety of different features that are available in our products today and available externally through products that Zoom makes that aren't the meeting client. And as you heard at NAB, we now have even more developments that are available through our developer platform and companies that have built Zoom into their own tools. So I thought I'd start with just trying to ground us and where we fit into the tools ecosystem, what we're talking about with Production Studio, and then we can get into more detail and of course your questions. So when you think about the landscape of production, we have the tools that are available in the Zoom client, right? We have the menus and the features that you can sit there and you can open up Zoom on your computer and you can manage just with a keyboard and mouse directly inside of the client. And we also have our sort of, I would think about that as sort of our entry point, if you will. You can build off of that with production tools. And so traditionally, the next step in the platform was to go either grab the liminal app, ZoomOSC, ZoomISO, tie things out to a Stream Deck, do some automations, maybe with Isadora, maybe build a custom front end and universe control, right? And that was moving you along further. And then there is using Zoom as a contribution platform to some sort of broadcast, if you will. And that's where ZoomISO and Zoom Rooms and some of the integrations that we announced at NAB also come into play. We're going to use Zoom as sort of a contribution point, pull in all the feeds, and then we're going to bring it into traditional broadcast infrastructure. Production Studio fits squarely on the native toolset side of the equation. What it's designed to do is be an easier entry point for getting some production value without having to pull out the vMix rig and the ZoomISO and all of that cost and all that expertise. It's designed to make webinars that take place inside of the Zoom Events platform have more production value. So that's really the focus of it. It's not a vMix competitor. It's not going to do everything that your ATEM can do. It's not going to be necessarily the same type of use case that you would pull out Wirecast for example. But what it is the ability to have a little bit more production value inside of webinars that take place inside Zoom Events. Now, it has one other feature that I really want to double down on because this is unique and this is a little bit different from what I was discussing before. So yes, as an easy entry point, Production Studio is a great tool for you, but it's also the only tool in our tool belt today that allows a session, as Sam eloquently said in his video that we posted on YouTube, it allows a session to be produced within itself. And what do I mean by that? Traditionally, no matter how much money you threw at this problem, you were going to have to pull the Zoom guests out of a talent meeting, mix them in external hardware or software, and then deliver it back into Zoom. And that's what we call the produced panel concept, or I sometimes refer to as the transport meeting topology, right? This idea that we're going to have the guests in one place, produce them with tools, and then deliver to another location. And that's great because we have full customization and control, but it does mean that additional work has to be done in order to be able to transport interactions between our audience and our presenters, right? So using chat bridges and Q&A tools and all the different work that comes into doing that. So Production Studio, like I said, allows the session to be produced within itself. And that means that the presenters and the audience, the panelists and the attendees are located within the same webinar, and production can still be added to that. We have control of the layouts, border colors, aspect ratios, backsplash, name tags, things like that. So we have the ability to add those production elements to a show without having to tie out any additional infrastructure and without having to run a separate meeting. So all the native tool sets like Q&A and chat are directly available to the panelists and attendees. As a producer, you don't have to do any additional work to build that connection. So even as a professional who has access and expertise about all these additional tools, this is now another capability in your tool belt where if a customer comes to you and says that they have a certain requirement, whether your staffing needs don't allow you to have a produced panel, or the structure and design of the event is really focused on interactivity and you don't have the infrastructure needed to do a transport meeting topology for getting that chat and Q&A back, this is going to be a great tool that will allow you to have production value in the event without having to build it all out. So I wanted to frame us in that area and talk about where we're sitting inside of the platform. Like I said, for professionals, it's another tool. And for more of like our marketing personas, or perhaps some of our non-technical producers, this is a great entry point to adding production value to your events. So I wanted to start us off there. And then maybe Sam or Jonathan, did you have any additional thoughts or color you wanted to add on that idea?
Yeah, so I mean, you hit it really well there, and you kind of covered all the bases of like there is a net new magic piece to Production Studio. There is something that Production Studio does that nothing else out there does. No matter how much gear you have, no matter how much crew you have, no matter how much money you spend, you cannot produce a show within a webinar and send it back to that webinar. It won't be in sync. Can't do it. Production Studio can do it for the first time ever. And like Andy said, that breakdown between your panelists and your show itself, you know, if you're just talking about chat, there's ways to bridge chat. We can take it, we can show it in different places. You could double join. There are things to do, but they're all a little complex. They're all a little confusing. And when you're dealing with your main panelists, your executives, potentially non-technical people, or people that are just coming in, they could be the smartest people in the world, but they're just coming in to present to your audience, and that's all they need to think about. It's very distracting to sometimes to try to do these different things in the methods that we've had to do them in the past. And especially so if you want to take it to the next levels of all the other interactive options you have. Maybe it's not just chat. You've got Q&A going on. You're using polls. You're making this a highly interactive and engaging session. And all of those things are things that your audience or your presenters either have to just smile and nod and pretend that they can see and interact with, or they have to be double joined, or you have to have a lot of systems in place to actually get it across to them, and adds a lot of complexity. It is why my team exists. And it is why a lot of the things that you guys do exists, is because it's hard, but because it's good. And the end result is really awesome. But this is now an additional tool in the tool belt to, in a lot of ways, get in and at a much lower level, be able to get a pretty almost comparable result out of it, or in some cases, again, do something that just cannot be done any other way. And it really does have a lot of different use cases up and down the gamut of, you know, how much resources are we throwing into this? What sort of production are we doing? It has places in sort of every tier of that, depending on what you need and what your use case is.
And I think I'll add, sorry, if I may, I'll add to that as well. I think it's important to understand Production Studio in the context of Zoom Events, right? This is where it's accessible through Zoom Events, our events platform. Specifically though, right, we can talk about Production Studio and the pros and cons when you're doing a single session, a single event, and compare that to existing external solutions. But keep in mind that one of the main features of Zoom Events is multiple concurrent sessions and larger conferences. And so if that is something that you are servicing, Production Studio significantly takes away that load of having to do production in each and every one of those concurrent sessions. And instead, you just need a single operator in each session. Or in some cases, even some of the panelists can operate themselves, depending on how you set it up. So again, putting it in that context of large conferences, multi-sessions, it starts to make a lot of sense.
And I think one more point is just to be absolutely clear about what Production Studio isn't. And I think that, for all the amazing things that it was designed specifically for the purposes we described. It was not designed to be a vMix replacement, right? So animations, transitions, overlays, complex graphics, that still lives in the produced panel world, or even things that take place outside of the Zoom Events platform where you want to add production value. Those are going to be areas where all the information and all the guidance that Zoom has provided you over the years is still going to apply and still be very appropriate, right? Production Studio is not designed to be a replacement for that tool. But what it is, like I said, it's designed to give you, fundamentally, it's designed to give you better control of layouts. And just to be specific, again, that's going to be your backsplash, border colors, aspect ratios, and layout. Name tags as well, but that's been part of session branding for a while. So it's designed to basically give you a list of scenes that you can then pop between and control the way that the webinar looks and feels and bring it more within the feeling of your brand. But it's not designed to be a vMix replacement. And one of the things that, just to give you a little bit of behind the scenes, when we set out to create Production Studio, we started with what we wanted it to do. We also started where we didn't want it to do. And we've been designing this with an ecosystem in mind the entire time. So I think we should calibrate our expectations accordingly about what this tool is and what this tool isn't. And I think it offers, like I said, a tremendous amount of value within the Zoom Events platform, a tremendous amount of value to reduce the amount of infrastructure required to get to the end result that you're looking for. And in many cases, Production Studio by itself will be sufficient to satisfy the customer requirements. But it definitely intentionally leaves space behind for those additional production tools that are required. And the Produce panel is still going to be something to learn about. ZoomISO, Wirecast, all the new blue titler integration, the SPX graphics, all that stuff is going to be still important to learn about, and happy to answer questions about those NAB announcements again today. It's all part of one story, right? It's not multiple pieces of a platform competing with each other. It's one cohesive ecosystem. And we spent a lot of time trying to design it to make sure that everything was complementary. Everything tells a story. It graduates you up through the flow. Even simple things like having Production Studio be a preview program workflow that maybe somebody hasn't experienced that before. It's an easy way to get into that idea. And now you start to graduate up to something with vMix or more of a traditional A/B switcher. You're using concepts that we've trained you on as you move up the platform, right? So it's designed to be complementary, it's designed to be part of our ecosystem play. And that means being intentional about what it does and what it doesn't do.
And so now, like from that, let's take a quick look at, in my head, I think I've come up with 5 different, like the 5 gradations as we go up. We start with meetings. Meetings, everyone is on an equal playing field. All of my participants here, you're able to pin, you're able to choose your view. You can have control over that. As a host, I can do some spotlighting like we're doing today, but I'm not holding you to a view. If you want to go to gallery view, you can do that. Webinar, I can take the view and force it to my attendees. I can say, you're going to be in active speaker. You're going to look at these 2 people spotlight. You're going to be in gallery view. Then I can add session branding, which is a feature that is licensed with Zoom Events, but is available in standalone webinars. And now I can take a wallpaper for my entire event. I can take a wallpaper. I can take those name tags and I can make it look a little bit nicer, or a little bit more polished. I can decide whether you're looking at the gallery or an active speaker still, or a side-by-side with content. But all of my video boxes are 16:9. There's no borders. It's one wallpaper for the whole show. And that's what it is. The next one I can go up to is Production Studio. Production Studio, and because we haven't said this yet today, is a feature inside Zoom Events. It is available only for webinars, only in Zoom Events. And sorry, will be available. It is in beta right now. GA is coming shortly, but I do need to specify that. But it is a Zoom Events webinar feature that allows me to take that further and create different scenes and layouts. Because one of the things that I've kind of said for a long time now is that any snapshot of a show doesn't really matter. A show is about moving between different scenes and snapshots. That's what makes it a show. That's what makes it an event, is curating what people should see at different parts in different contexts. Sometimes I have content, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I need to see multiple people. Sometimes I have my MC, then I have speakers. There, in an event, there isn't just one look that I need people to be in. And in all these ways, I've had different ways to push my attendees around, but this is the first one that really gives you that preview program scene control that Andy mentioned, where I can take these predetermined looks or even customize them a bit on the fly, and then take that, go live. I now get the ability to change aspect ratios. I get the ability to control my layout a little bit more. I want my content on the left versus the right, the top versus the bottom, over my people, all of that stuff. I can have different wallpapers in different scenes, which is something you saw us do yesterday on the call. And that's kind of where I'm at. My borders are single colors. They don't have rounded corners. I'm picking out of existing layouts. My backgrounds are still images, and I have no transitions. It's cuts. That's the sort of limitations between that and the last tier, which is full production, whatever I got, world's your oyster. Pull the video out of a meeting. And this is the first time we've had to step into a split that Produce panel concept, pull it out of a meeting, produce it externally, vMix, Atom, TriCaster, however I'm doing it, and then inject it over into another webinar. At that point, I can do whatever I want. I can have custom masked images. I can have merge transitions with them flying around. I can have video layers and backgrounds and graphics throwing on the top and do whatever. But this is the first time that, again, I had to separate my architecture, and it got a lot more complicated very quickly to get those things.
I guess that means I'm on. I was gonna say earlier when you guys were talking on the and you brought out the preview program type side by side view. I think what I saw was what I saw in Sam's demo, and that was, and I don't know if I have all the terminology now, but this particular layout, right? Let's say it's a 4-up. It's in program, but it's also in preview, right? So the same layout is in program and preview. And I'm pretty confident that I saw Sam edit that 4-up that was in program and preview with no harm to program, and then was able to switch that over as well, which I thought was a super feature in the sense of just how natural. I mean, that's a super natural mistake for a newbie to make, is to not recognize what's in program and make changes and screw things up. And I'll tell you what, I'm guilty of it with virtual PTZ inputs in vMix, because it's the same daggone camera. You want that view, but you can't go to it even in preview because it's going to change it in program as well.
Yeah, can you tell that production people were involved in, making this, and try to protect ourselves from some of our own mistakes.
Yeah.
But now, to be clear, though, the editing that you saw was editing who is in the scene. I think it's important to mention that you have to create all of your scenes ahead of time in the web portal before you start your event, which I think, and I wanted to get Sam and Jonathan's thoughts on this as well, but we wanted to maybe give some guidance about what you might want to put into those scenes ahead of time, like maybe some safety scenes or some backup scenes that you always create when you're in web portal, just so you have them available in your scene list, because we do have those failover capabilities. We do have the ability that if somebody didn't show up, because we know events don't go as planned, if somebody isn't available at a certain time in a certain place, you can still put that scene into program and it'll flow back down to the most natural available look that was in that roster. It'll still have most of the branding available, but it will just, it'll reflow the tiles to make that work. So, we certainly understand that that's not there, but there are some best practices to think about, and doing the diligence when you're setting up the event is certainly a very important part of Production Studio's flow. We also try to give you some tools to be able to recover in real time as the event is unfolding and you have to make changes. You're choosing from a scene list. You can march through it in a linear way, but you can also have some things at the end there that you can bounce to if you need them and pull those back in as well.
Yeah. And so in a second here, we'll bring up the share and I'll show a couple of these things maybe, but yes, that is what you saw, Jeff, is that like Andy said, you have to build all the layouts before you launch the event. That's built in the events web portal, where you actually decide, I'm going to have a layout where I'm going to have these boxes in these places. And that does start from picking a predetermined sort of like template layout, and then saying, I want this layout. I want my aspect ratios to be this. I want my spacing, my top size. I want my wallpaper. I want a border this thick, this color. You have a lot of kind of settings around it, but it starts with that layout. Once I've built that, and I can build out up to 50 scenes there, I can either build them where I'm saying, hey, I want to have a 2-up of Jeff and Sam. I want a 2-up of Jeff and Andy. I want a 2-up of Andy and Sam. I want a 3-up of Andy, Sam, and Jonathan. And I want a 4-up of Jeff, Andy, Sam, and Jonathan. Or I can say, I want a 1-up, 2-up, 3-up, 4-up. And then during the show, drag them in. Or, and this is the power move I'll show you, I could say, I want a 4-up. And then put Andy in it and send it live. And it'll turn into a 1-up. It can fall back down. And that's what Andy was mentioning with the safety scenes I'll talk about. But if we think of it like, let's go full production for a second and think about like AV bus switchers, multi-ME switchers, where I may have like build this scene out in an ME and send that live, and then build my next scene out in my other ME or my other super source and then send that live. And like Jeff said, I have to think of it in this A-B process of, while A is on air, I need to edit B and then send B on, and then I need to edit A. And that with Production Studio, it is kind of doing that virtually in the background without you having to think about it. So like when we first started making, before I actually got to play with it, I was thinking through what scenes would I always want. And so I said, okay, well, I'll need a 9-up. I always need a 9-up because that's the most you can have. and it'll always fall back down. If I put 3 people in, it turns into a 3-up. So I said, I'll need 2 9-ups so I can have the one that's on air and the other one that I'm editing. And then as soon as we started playing with it, I did learn, like Jeff is saying, that yes, I can take that single 9-up, throw it on program, pull it back into preview, change it. It does not affect my program, and then send it live. So with that, you actually have a lot of power to say, in my show, I could just build, here's my 1-up I really like. Here's my gallery view, my 4-up I really like. Here's my 1-up with content I really like, and run my entire show that way. Or mix and blend, how much do I want to march through my scenes and how much do I want to just have a couple safeties, or any combination thereof. What works for my show? We're not here to determine that for you. Aaron, let's go ahead and start that screen share, and I'll show you guys this. So this is actually a live call that I have going on. We'll go and switch over to that camera there. Sweet. So this is a live call that I have going on here where I've got my video loops going in as my different presenters. This is a real Zoom event with Production Studio running real and live. This is the one that you saw us use on Wednesday in the demo. But like I'm saying, I've got this one built out with Adam, and I can send it live. I need to take the webinar live for it to go. Sorry, there we go. So now that scene with Adam and the 3 is live, and I've got this other scene with Amina and the 3 in preview. This is actually 2 different scenes here, but I can pull the same scene. This is the same one I have there, or let's do it this way. I've got nobody assigned here. I'm gonna put Kevin there, send it live, and then I'm gonna pull that back into preview here. This is the same scene in preview and program, but I can come in here and replace it. There's my other 1-up because I saw that she started talking. And I can just move around. It's just that fast. And so what we're talking about with the 9-ups and those kind of those scenes you always want to build is, I think you always want to build a 9-up because, again, 9 is the most you can put on screen. And you always want to build a content plus 4-up at minimum. That's the 2 scenes that I would put in every single show. And it's because I can come in here, and even if I didn't have a 1-up, I could come drop, and there's my 1-up. I could come in here and I could drop, and there's my 2-up. I could drop, and there's my 3-up. And what it's doing as it does this, it looks like we just lost Jen's video. That's fine. But as it does this, what it's actually doing is it's deciding which ones it has, and any participants that are not in that call, it'll just fall back to that version of that scene. So it's still respecting which aspect ratios I have, what borders I have, what top spacing, what spacing between them I had. It respects all of those different things and builds me that look with less people in it.
So, quick question. If you were on your 4-up live and lost Jen's video, would it just dynamically snap all 3 equally wide in a live program out view as well?
If Jen left, yes. So if someone drops from the call, if they turn their camera off, it'll go to their profile image. But if they leave the call or if they drop from the call, then yes, while it's live, it will fall back. So
let's say they broke the rules and they turned their camera off. So now you've got slot 4 with a profile picture. So if you kept that 4-up that's in live in preview also, then you could remove them on the fly, and then that would adjust it in program?
I would need to pull them. I would need to pull it to preview and then send it to program again. So showing that, Aaron, go ahead and Aaron, if you want to stop the camera on Amina real quick. And then that went back to her. That's her profile picture, which is why it did that. And then if you want to go ahead and drop Amina out of the call. And then it fell back. And you can see this hand didn't touch anything either. So that is how that will work. And then when Amina joins again, you see that she automatically populated back into my scene in preview here that was looking for her. It's waiting for her video to load, but it does do that. And then it would look for me to take that scene again. if I were to bring this back in a preview, you can see that it's loading there. Cool. Aaron, we can go and stop the share.
One of the things, Sam, that's kind of nice about this, I don't know if we explicitly stated, but when you're in the web portal, you're actually you can assign who you want in which box based on the speakers that you have available and defined in Zoom events. So you don't have to immediately, run and assign all the people to all the boxes as soon as you start the webinar. You can know who these people are going to be as long as they join as the account that you associated to that square or that rectangle in your layout. It'll automatically populate into that. And then you saw when Amina left the call, you got a sort of a help information when you were in the preview bus that said, hey, this person's actually not here. Just be advised that it's not going to, you're not going to have that person there at that point. So it is aware of those different circumstances.
The other thing is that while, like Andy said, you have the ability to you could set up every single speaker you want. Just it's programmed. I built all my scenes. I've assigned them all and I'm just clicking go, or you can reassign on the fly. You can also, any of those reassignments you're doing on the fly, it does save. So as long as I keep that window up in that session, it's going to keep all those things. So if I were one of the things we did during rehearsal was for the webinar on Wednesday, it was me and Robin Bonovich speaking. But during rehearsal, I had one of my other team members as a stand-in for Robin. And so what we did is right as soon as we got on the call, we just went in within the production studio window. We didn't have to reconfigure the website. We just, within production studio, we just drug her on to everywhere that it would have been Robin. We drug my stand-in on. And then as we kept switching around scenes, it kept that reassignment. So it's not like it was like every time I try to bring up a new scene with Robin, I'm having to reassign it to this other person. So if you did have someone somehow join incorrectly, which with Zoom events is going to be really hard. But, if I do have someone who gets in, they're just the wrong thing. They came as a Zoom room or something, and I need to promote them up to a panelist and start dragging them in. It's going to keep those assignments and it's going to let you kind of dynamically shift and grow with your show. Again, like Andy said earlier, we know things don't go according to plan all the time. And there are actually a lot of ways to dynamically and responsively work along with that.
And I think you can feel a little bit of, and I have to give him some credit here because of all of his amazing contributions to this. You can feel a little bit of Adam Tao in the way that this is designed. You think about how, some of his other projects function and work and the way that things flow together and have these recoveries. You can feel him in this design here. This is, again, it's, production people thinking about how this comes together, and we get it. We've been there with you, and we're trying to design it in such a way that it feels natural and responsive and helpful to you as the event's unfolding.
Yeah, I think I was just driving around yesterday and my mind wouldn't stop, and I'm like, it's me as a vMix producer am amazed when Sam was showing like a 3-up and it just like, well, how much spacing do you want? And everything equally changes. I mean, like that's like mind-blowingly simple. And it's exactly what the target that we try to get to, but it's a total pain in the butt to get there. And some of these tools, vMix is one of them. Horrible. Like, I love the product, but there's certain things I really, really despise about it, and that it's not a snappable designer. There's no guidance and alignment and so forth.
And that's a trade-off that you're going to take in that with vMix, you can make a layout exactly what you want. And I want to shift this box by a pixel, and I can do it. And I can take I can do a 3-up, and I can make it to where one of them is slightly bigger than the other one and slightly smaller. I could do all sorts of stupid stuff if I wanted to. And if I want them to all be the same, I could do that too. And I could take it, and I could copy it, or I could be careful about it. But it's going to take me time. And that's something that we've all done. If you're working in vMix, is that you all have made really great layouts that you want. You can do presets, you can do templates, and you can save them. And it works well, but it takes time. Versus in this, I can just go, hey, you know what? I want that spacing a little bit bigger, and drag the slider over one notch. And then I can say, cool. And I want to edit all of my scenes to have that. And I just click on the scene and go from medium to large spacing and hit save, medium to large and hit save. Nice. And it is very fast.
So can you build a scene without assignments of people?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
And so that's what you saw in the live demo and in this one right now, is that like that 9-up. I built that scene. I said, I want a 9-up. I said, I want them to be, that's actually a 3:2 aspect ratio. It's not quite 16:9. I said, I want a dark gray, thin border. Actually, I didn't say all those things because I had said them all earlier. And what I did was I took one of my earlier scenes that had my spacings, my top safe area, my border, my color, everything. And I said, duplicate, and then make it a 9-up. 2 clicks. And then now I had a 9-up with nobody assigned to it, with all of my branding, my wallpaper, my border color, all the other things I had. And I clicked save. 3 clicks. And I had a 9-up. And then from there, within this show, I drag and drop whoever I want onto it, and I hit go. That's it.
There's a couple of best practices there, Jeff, to think about, like what properties get inherited when we're going into a fallback situation, and how do you design ahead of time to be aware of those? So when we're in a fallback scenario, by which I mean somebody who was supposed to be in this scene isn't there or left, the scene is going to reflow to the grid layout that corresponds to the number of video tiles that we have available. But it will maintain the border color, it'll maintain the aspect ratio, it'll maintain the backsplash, it'll hold those properties forward. So when you think about that, you should design, when you pull in your 9-up, I would make sure that like you don't have a lot of complex graphics in the upper area that are dependent on a certain type of layout, because it'll reflow to the grid form of that layout. So, don't worry about the considerations of like safe area and things like that when you're putting that together. Just have something that will work and be part of that design language. Again, so much of Zoom events, and this is inherited from session branding, we're thinking about the language of the design, and then the production is flowing down from those properties. So as you're building this out, you want to think about, okay, do I have a backsplash that works in a very generic sense that I can always fall back to when needed? And those are some of the properties you're going to want to think about as you're putting together your list of scenes.
Right. And kind of like even competing against that concept is what I did on Wednesday, which is we had our main look that you'll see throughout all the screenshots is it's a 1-up with content. So it's me on the side with pillar boxing so that I don't take up too much space, but I can still be pretty big presence on the screen. And then next to me is a laptop with the screen shared content placed on it. And it looks like production. It's not. It's a wallpaper. It's a wallpaper where I happen to know where the content box was going to lay out. I took a screenshot of it, sent it to my graphics guy and said, put a laptop behind it. So it's just kind of a clever use of it. But to Andy's point, you need to be careful about doing something like that, because if the screen share had stopped while that scene was live, what happens is it turns into a 1-up. It's a 1-up with content. It turns into a 1-up using my pillar boxing, using my border, inheriting my settings, but I shift to the center. And now I'm half on that laptop, half off, and I have a blank screen. And that's the behavior I wanted to have. That's the fallback I want. I don't want it to just go off screen or anything. But in that case, because I have kind of built myself into that corner, it looks really nice while it's working. And then if it's not, I just need to be ready to make sure I have a 1-up 16:9 without the laptop on the wallpaper, just for the generic one. And that's what I would actually have my operator go to if we had a technical issue or if we needed to step outside our normal. I was just gonna say also that, I said like I need that 1-up with 16:9. I actually don't even need it because I have my handy 9-up down at the bottom. Drags me onto that, hits go, and he's safe. No matter what happened. There we go, because that was a 1-up 3:2 with my border, with my generic background prepped. I have those 2 scenes, and I can cover whatever I need to cover.
Now, we've spoken a lot about the producer experience. I think it would be good for us to share maybe a little bit more about the panelist experience when you're a member of a webinar taking place within Zoom events that uses Production Studio. So there's a couple of nice creature comforts that help tie this together. You get these very elegant notifications that you basically, as the producer, you have, and maybe we can show this on screen if we have it available. We have the ability to notify presenters that they're coming up next. So if you have a rotating panel conversation, the same people aren't always on air, you have a button as the producer that can send a notification to the attendees, to the panelists, that the people in this scene and only the people in this scene are coming up next, and they'll get notified of that. Likewise, when you put them on air, they get a notification that they're available there. But these aren't these big pop up in the center of your screen dialogues that you have to dismiss right when you're trying to talk. It's just one of those subtle things like what we have for the enabling captions and things like that, that just shows up as like a pill in the upper area that dismisses itself. That's up there that you can deal with. So it's a nice way of getting some communication to the panelists about the structure of the event and how things are flowing. As panelists, what you're going to see is a multi-spotlight of the members of the scene that's in program, and that's automatically managed for you. You don't have to spotlight them separately. It's just, it knows who's in the scene that's on air, and it will multi-spotlight all of the panelists who are in that scene, so that as in a panelist view, you see, you know, your colleagues who are going to be in that scene. They're available there. You can view them quite easily through the multi-spotlight. And then in the upper ribbon, you'll have a copy of program view that's available for you to view as well. So it's all managing these things for you automatically as you're marching through it. Again, the reason for that is that the host computer, if you think about it like an edge node, it's the one that's mixing the audio and video. So the attendees are receiving the mixed video stream from the host computer. The panelists, obviously, we want engaged in a low latency conversation with each other so that it flows naturally. So they're going to see a multi-spotlight as the primary viewing point instead of the mixed video feed for latency considerations. So that's, and then when you do screen sharing as well, you can notify the presenter to automatically open up their share screen dialog so they can be ready to go before that thing comes on air. How many times have we cut to a scene that says, yeah, hold on a second, let me share my screen, and then we wait for 30 seconds while people navigate the different menus. Oh yeah, the green icon, and then okay, you can send them that dialogue ahead of time and get them into that so it's ready before you take it live as well. So those little creature comforts, I think, tighten up some corners in the production and help it flow better.
I also want to point out one hidden benefit behind the method that Production Studio is using here, and that's kind of version control. And the idea that whenever we're doing webinars with large numbers of attendees, they're joining in a multitude of ways. They are joining on phones, they are joining on Android and iOS and iPads, and they're joining by Mac and PC and browsers and different browsers, and they're joining by streaming gateways to YouTube, and they're joining watching cloud recordings or local recordings or Zoom rooms or H323 or SIP devices. There are so many ways to get into a Zoom call. And there are so many versions of Zoom within each of those that it's just the idea of trying to keep something as fast moving as this up to speed across all of those things, and to try to, like, I guess, stepping back into what I don't want to do as a host of a webinar, as a host of a large scale event. If I have 1,000 people joining my event, I need to know how they experience it. And I need to know what they see at all times. And what I can't have is I think I'm sending them X produced view, and instead they really see Y. And the way Production Studio is managing that is with the host doing the rendering and then sending it up, which I don't want to get into technical weeds on it as much as to say, right now, desktop versions, what was it? It was 5.13.3, I think. It's a version that goes back to December that can see everything we do in Production Studio. We're adding new layouts constantly because we're in beta right now. We're heading to GA. We're adding new layouts. We're adding new features. We're adding new things that Production Studio can do. And you know what? A version from last December can still see all of them because of how it's architectured. And that's really cool because that's going to continue leading into our speed of delivery and being able to, hey, there's a layout that we didn't include at GA that we need. We're going to be able to add that really quickly and say, this is a new layout, a new use. There's one that's not in there at the moment that we're excited about, where you'll be able to have basically use your wallpaper as slides. Essentially, you upload your slides as individual wallpapers in your scenes, and then have your video content be a box in the corner overlapping it, which is not a layout that exists right now because it wasn't in the first thoughts of how I would use wallpaper in a different way. But that's something that, great, we have this new idea, this new thought, we can just create that layout, add it, and now only the host needs to be on that later version to have access to that and to be able to run that. And all of my attendees still see it correctly.
But a bit of a cautionary note as well to consider the flip side of this. You need to make sure that you're designing for the experiences that all the different audiences could see, right? So if you are you're thinking about your layout, you should look at what that layout looks like on a phone so that you know what that's going to read as, because it's one video feed going out to all those different endpoints. So design with that in mind. Make sure that the faces are large enough to be readable. Make sure that the layouts, are not encroaching on the content in such a way that it's unreadable on mobile. Take advantage, of course, the capabilities that Zoom's offering here, but design with the audience in mind when you're building Production Studio. That produced video feed, think about the different ways that it's going to be wrapped. What's the context around how this video feed is going to look? This is more design advice than technical advice, but something important to consider as you're putting this together. How'd we do, Jeff? I think you're muted.
There we go. Everybody must hear my background noise because somebody keeps muting me, and it's probably my own doggone fault. I'll turn off original sound. So there's questions. So let me, and John's been super patient. He was the first question, actually. He says, being a coder, could we have an indication of where we will be able to use the API to control Zoom events and production?
So is this, so you're asking for developer hooks into Zoom Events platform itself. So the way I understand it, so there are APIs available for Zoom Events. You can check them out on the Zoom developer platform. There's various parts of the Zoom event creation process that you can get into and control. These are not specific to Production Studio. They're part of the Zoom Events product itself. So you can check out the documentation and what endpoints are available on the Zoom developer platform.
Josh Kaufman asks, can you provide an overview about the experience and look of Zoom Production Studio event from the perspective of the attendees versus the panelists, which I think we have talked about that if there's anything missing.
They'll see the produced video feed. Now you have the ability to fall back and send them into gallery view or speaker view as well from within Production Studio, but they're going to be seeing the produced video feed, whatever that right-hand side on-air program view, that's exactly what they see and nothing else.
Right. If I were to, if I were to take the recording that you guys can watch, that YouTube link, if I took that and I played it back as my virtual camera into a webinar, that is what it looks like live. That's it. Spot on. Exactly. It's literally the produced feed. And then on the panelist side, like Andy said, it looks like a regular meeting. It looks like a regular, the webinar, the panelist side of it, except there's an additional participant in the top left of my film strip. That is the produced view up above. I can see the produced view as like a little program there, so I can kind of see what's going on. And then it's like I've got somebody like Jeff with their spotlight controller spotlighting like crazy to make sure that I am always looking at the people who are in that scene live. So I have a really good view of these are the people I should pay attention to. These are the people that are participating. These are the ones that are on screen and nothing else.
Good stuff. And Josh has a second question in there. Are the ISO feeds available for capture with ZoomISO during a Zoom Production Studio production?
Yeah, because it's just a webinar. It's a webinar. Production Studio is running, but all of those participants are still available to ZoomISO and to, if you had a separate production path you were taking, or you're just ISO recording potentially, all of that is still available.
Good stuff. Frank asks, when will this be released? Is it live now? I know very early. You said it's in beta, but
correct. Yeah,
and I don't know if you're able to give us a date or not. Usually not, but you did say shortly.
It won't be a date, but yeah, we are looking to. It's in beta now, and we're looking to hit GA in the next few months. Is the goal.
Okay, great. Good stuff. Let me. I was peppering Andy yesterday with excitement and questions. And one of them was, I simply said, hey, did you meet your goal? Because I know when we were out at Zoomtopia, his goal was that Production Studio would deliver to a recording and a live stream what we delivered to the audience. And it sounds like we achieved all of that, which I just say that's amazing. It's truly amazing because there's still disconnects in those avenues, if you will, with some streaming and making a speaker about a 16th of the size of the screen when they're laid out on top of a share and so forth. Things that drive me crazy. But this is super, super, super exciting. I did jot down a question I didn't have earlier, which was the host, you've indicated that the host is responsible for this rendering. And so there's increased requirements for the host. What can we expect, if you will? So, my experience as a host, not that I take any more load than anybody else because I'm a host in a meeting, but I can say, hey, if I'm at 3 to 6 meg, that's my going range. How much of a variation if I become a host of a production studio event? How much of a variation in whether it's a percentage or whatnot might we expect or anticipate?
I can speak a little bit to some of that. So you're producing an additional video feed. So when that happens, you're going to be sending out both your participant video and audio, but you're also producing a mixed audio and mixed video experience as an additional participant. So think about your bandwidth accordingly, right? A Zoom 1080p 30 FPS video feed is typically between 4 and 6 megabit per second. So double, because you're going to be, if your camera is HD and you're also producing production studio, that's 2 contributing feeds back to the Zoom cloud ecosystem versus just the one. Then also you have to ingest the participant video feeds in order to be able to mix them. So that's a little, I don't have specific numbers for you on that, but you're going to be pulling in those video feeds, mixing them on the computer, and then pushing them up as well. So we're going to issue guidance about what type of minimum system requirements there are, CPU, GPU, RAM, all that kind of stuff. But on the network side, just be aware that you're producing an additional video feed beyond what you would normally contribute to the meeting with in your mic and your camera.
And now some additional color on that even is that on the send side, it's actually not even going to be as bad as what Andy just laid out, which 12 megabits is not that bad for streaming high quality stuff. But it won't even be that bad because Zoom is still doing all the magic we always do, in that your local camera, your produced feed is at 1080, 4 to 6 megs max bitrate. But your local camera realistically is never going to be having to go up in 1080 because you're either part of the mixed feed, in which case you've been spotlit for all the panelists. And if there's multiple people on screen, you're probably looking at either a 360 or maybe a 1080. Or if someone pinned you, but like functionally Zoom with all of its all the different ways it tries to manage the bandwidth well, and the way we fall up and down off that is still at work and doing a great job.
And again, not sorry to interject, but keep in mind as well that in most cases we would recommend that the host operating production studio is not one of the presenters. Of course you can, that's how it's designed. But in the case where you are just an operator or technician using production studio, you don't even need to have your full HD video being sent up to the meeting, just the final output to production studio if you're concerned about bandwidth.
Right. And there's nothing technical about that. That's just how you're running the show. Like we watched the show on Wednesday. I did not switch myself because I needed to focus on presenting. Technically I could have, but also separately from that, like Andy said, we'll release the system requirements and suggestions. But I showed this actually on the call in the demo. You'll see we were running it off of an M2 MacBook Air at the time, and I'm trying to remember how much. I think it was about 25% CPU it was using when I was testing it on my. I have an i7 MacBook. I was testing it on the other day, and that was running like 35 or something. In my experience, not to stick to any hard numbers here because so many variables there, but my experience has been that it is exceptionally lighter than what I'm used to if I'm trying to do the same sorts of things with OBS or the like, trying to take a bunch of different NDI sources or whatever and render them out. If I was running ZoomISO next to OBS on a machine, it would use a lot more.
The MVP is not going to be a Puget Systems computer, I promise you.
So at Zoom, there's like this magic number. Anybody know what I'm talking about? This maximum number, pens, spotlights, and now scenes is this number 9. Is it all related? And I don't even know behind the scenes what limits. I can show 49 in my gallery on a crummy computer, 25. But when it comes to spotlights and pens, that for some reason, characteristically, there had to be a chosen limit of 9. I'm assuming it's related, but I just wanted to kind of throw that out there for not that it means a whole lot for production, but I would assume there's some folks who go, I could definitely leverage more than 9,
And the good news is if you need to do that, in Production Studio, you can pump back to gallery view. So like we definitely, are aware that there are some super large panels. It's definitely not the majority, and it's actually a very small percentage. In my understanding of the market is that, that's going to be a relatively rare use case, but it is possible. At the end, you want to do a Q&A and have everybody available. All 15 executives are going to be available there at the end. You can pump it back into gallery view within the Production Studio ecosystem. But where the 9 comes from, my understanding, 3x3 layout, right? So like you're thinking about how basically to get a square grid, and there's all sorts of considerations. How many video feeds can be rendered at what resolution on how many computers and types and things like that? How much bandwidth do we want to be pulling on average and things like that? And again, like we said, underneath Production Studio is a multi-spotlight going on, which is also capped at 9. So 9 people in a scene, we can multi-spotlight 9 of them so that the panelists can see them underneath that. So it's a constellation of different considerations, but also a design component of it as well, right? As you are adjusting the layouts and boxes and things like that, you're chopping up the screen with different pieces of that. That's a single 1080 raster, right? And now you're going to have subcomponents within that. So there is just some best practice and some gentle guidance on the Zoom side as well, trying to shape the experience and make sure that looks best for everybody.
Makes sense.
Now, one of the things I want to just go ahead and call out real quick is something that Production Studio is the first one to do, and that's you've had ways to do with session branding. You can do a gallery view and you can do various multi-spotlights. So I could, put 4 people on whatever. But the thing that stays the same about all of those is they're all the same size. It's saying I have a panel and everyone is equally treated in there. Whereas you even saw it in my brief screen share here. Production Studio gives you a couple different ways to say this is my main person, or there's even layouts to do my main 2 people along with 4 others. And so you can create these layouts where I have like this, the active participant in the panel and the other panel members, or this is my MC and the panel we're about to go to, or some looks like that. Those are some of the possibilities in Production Studio.
And are all the layouts, is there just a library of fixed layouts that we choose from? It's not like we say, hey, this is a side by side, but now I want to add 2 more to the right. So the right side becomes a column and the left side becomes, that 1 to 3 up. It's not definable that way on the fly. I think they're pre-delivered to us.
Correct. It starts as templates. Yep.
We give you the scenes themselves, but then you modify the aspect ratios and borders and all that stuff on top of the base scene. So it's not like you need to have a 9 up that's 1 by 1, 16 by 9, 4 by 3. You have the different flows that are available in the layout collection, and then you have the modifications to that layout that flow underneath that.
Gotcha. Very good. Nobody's asked yet. Let me see what's on the list. Hoping you can all see. Sam, I've got you boosted up to co-host. You should be able to see Q&A as well. But John Drinkwater, this is just a note. To be able to export, edit, import templates would be a big help, and for those repeating similar events. And so it sounds like, because these templates are templates, these layouts are templates, they're going to be the same ones are going to be available for every. Now, the difference in what John's saying is they wouldn't have, I guess, pre-assigned like names. So if there was a need to reuse what you previously used, which also included the panelist names, then I'm guessing that is a non-carry-overable portion of that. Is that a correct assumption?
What exists right now is, like Andy said, choose the layout, make your settings to it. And then we've even already talked about how you would kind of choose a layout, make some settings to it, and then take that scene and duplicate it and assign a new layout to it and kind of do that. What doesn't exist in the initial release is I have a show with these 6 scenes that I use all the time with this branding, these wallpapers, these colors. Let me take that whole setup and save it as a template.
Now, that being said, there are properties that exist at the event level that are automatically inherited into the session, like some of the assets and things like that can flow down. So if we're thinking within one event, there are some synergies between things that can exist there. Yeah,
I think just ultimately don't look at this as the final. We always iterate. We always continue to improve.
Yeah. So have any new rules been created in the creation of production studio, like, because everything that gets added on says, hey, I'm an add-on, but I'm not allowed to break any Zoom rules. You know what I'm saying? Like ZoomISO, ZoomOSC, right? I mean, it can do a lot of great things, but it can't do anything Zoom can't do. You know, it's not penetrating those walls and boundaries. But this is a native build inside of Zoom. So, I mean, have there been, I mean, have you gone to the development team and said, hey, we need this, and it just has never ever been able to do that before?
Jeff, I am the development team. No, but no, it's a huge group and we all work together on it. But yeah, there are infrastructural things that have been, moving and shaking here internally to make this happen. And the big one is the ability to produce a session within itself, right? The ability to have an edge node, mix all the video and audio, and then push that out to the attendees in such a way that the audio comes from the host computer and the video comes from the host computer, not from the attendee to the or from the panelist to the attendee directly, right? So that's an architectural capability that's exciting us.
Just got the Zoom test.
And I hope
kitchen in the background.
hope you can see as well that we see
They just
Production
announced
Studio
their
as
Zoom,
a large step forward,
what are they
right?
calling
Things
it?
like webinar backsplash, name tags. That was a small step, starting to add some production features, some nicer visuals within your webinars. This is a much larger step forward. It can't speak to any Zoom rules that were broken or technologies that had to be specifically developed beyond what Andy said. But again, we feel very proud about what this how this positions webinars, and the fact that it allows you to consider Zoom meetings and webinars in a slightly different way, right? One in which the rendering happens essentially native, all within your client, and you don't need to have a complex setup to make this work. So again, I think there's a mentality shift, both outside looking in, but also even internally within Zoom. There's been a good mentality shift in how we think about webinars going forward.
Jeff, we have a
Something
hand
I
up.
thought about earlier
Jump
was that that failover, right? That cutaway scene, right? Everything goes to crap. You lose 2 out of your 3 speakers, you're down to 1, and so forth. And I thought, and especially if I'm new to it, I may be panicking, going, "How do I fix this right now?" Because I'm a fresh admin to it, and I thought it would at least at this point in time, because I haven't ever touched it, is to go to a 1-up active speaker. There is no active speaker in Production Studio, is there?
So there's a button at the top left. Top left button is bail to active speaker. And if I have session branding set up, then it's going to bail to active speaker with my wallpaper and everything. So that is literally the top left button.
There's
and next to
also
it is bail to
a
gallery.
participant type, though, that is active speaker. When you lay out the scene, you can say that it's not going to be a specific person that's going to go in this box. It's going to be whoever the active speaker is, which is also super, super cool.
Yeah.
And that will let you do it with your aspect ratio, your top safe area, your border, some of the things that the standard active speaker doesn't have. Because that.
So you're saying it does stay within that templated layout
with what Andy just mentioned. Where you can actually basically you assign, instead of assigning a person, you assign active speaker to be the presenter.
Oh, I like that.
And you can imagine like how useful that would be if you have a scene where like, all right, I'm going to have my host on my left-hand side, and then whoever they're interviewing or whoever like in this panel conversation where it's spontaneous is popping up, that that can definitely be helpful.
Good stuff. John asked,
Tlalak has his hand up also.
All right. Go ahead, Tlalak.
Sorry to interrupt here. I just have a couple of quick questions. So what's the philosophy on resolution? So are you using full resolution on all windows inside of a super source, let's call it?
It depends. So there's a couple of things that go into that. I think that these are some of the final mile things that are still being determined. And like what specifically, like we said, like, how the different components of Zoom interact with each other to create the raster image, and what things that have been part of the designs and part of the things that we showed at Zoomtopia come out in the first release, and subsequently, those are
Gotcha.
Active considerations.
And then when you do use the active speaker participant inside of let's say a 4-up, is that a minus is that a mix minus for, so you don't have doubles of somebody who's speaking inside of the other boxes?
Sam, have you tested that one? Do you know how that works exactly? I haven't looked at that recently myself.
I haven't. I was actually, Annie and I are chatting in the background here about the active speaker because there's some version differences, and I'm on a GA, or I'm on a public release versus some of the beta releases. So I haven't gotten to play enough with the active speaker box to see how it does that. But in general, it does a pretty good job of keeping people from becoming redundant. So I'll need to play to get an answer on that one.
You saw that there are some things that try to block that, like in yesterday's demo, when Sam tried to drag a person twice into a scene, it blocked that. That is something that obviously we don't want to see the same person twice in the scene.
I want to answer, actually, Talek, you said you had a couple questions.
I think that covers it. Thank you.
Okay. So I want to hit, I've got 3 back-to-back from different people about all screen sharing within it. And so kind of touching screen sharing in general, one asks if you can build a scene with a screen share as part of the layout, or do you have to do it as a camera feed? One asks, what are the options for layouts with shared screens? And then one is asking, when do the panelists see the shared content? And so kind of answering all those at once is that there are, I'm going to try to list all the screen share options. There's one that's like a one up on the wallpaper. There's one that's an edge to edge share screen. Let's cut away to a video. I don't care about my wallpaper. I just want my video to play back. We have that too. Then there's one-ups with content, or people with content rather. So I have basically the ability to put my content on one side and have 1, 2, 3, or 4 presenters. The other side, 1, 2, 3, or 4 presenters. Content up top with 1, 2, 3, or 4 presenters below it, and content on the bottom with 1, 2, 3, or 4 presenters above it. So kind of all your iterations. And again, all of those will fall back. If I were to build my content with 4 and then put 3 in there, it would work. And it would lay out correctly and do what it needs to do automatically. That is the screen share. And you can actually build scenes where you define who is screen sharing. So you can do some other, especially if you have multi-share going on, you can do some really cool stuff as far as transitioning from one to the next. The other thing, or answering the question about when do panelists see the screen share, is they see the screen share when and only when it is live. So this is actually a net new thing that hasn't existed before, in that my person, maybe it's a tech or maybe it's a presenter, shares their screen up, but it's not part of the show yet. It's not on screen. It's not in my layout. They can share that screen. I, as the host, can see it. I can see it in my previews. I can assign it. And then when I take that scene live, that's when the other panelists begin to see it. So that is definitely a cool
That's
feature.
super cool in the sense, it's ready as the tech director, right? Their camera's on, their share is up. Okay, cut to it, right? And I think that's fantastic.
I want to go ahead
Now,
and give.
I'm assuming the panelist view will see that share, like a meeting would naturally show a share, because you said they see the gallery, they see spotlights, but does that share not stomp on their view like a normal Zoom experience?
No. So the panelist side doesn't see the screen share until it is in a layout to go live.
Oh,
They only see
okay.
it when it's part of the scene.
Cool.
And they see it as, you can simulate exactly what it looks like today by putting yourself in standard view and starting a screen share with multiple spotlights happening, because that is literally what is happening. And that's why I say, like, on the panelist side, Production Studio is a really fancy automatic spotlight controller. That's what it is. That is what it is doing. It looks exactly like you think that would look based off that description, with the share screen, spotlights next to it, multi-spotlight happening the way it happens. That's what Production Studio is doing for the panelists. But one kind of side caveat I want to kind of give here is, and this is something Andy and I have been talking a lot about in various groups, is this does need to be thought about as production. It is Production Studio. It is producing a video feed. It is producing a 1080p video feed in which you have content, which means you should not have super small text, because it is going to get rendered in 1080p. A lot of people have been potentially a little bit spoiled in how amazingly Zoom treats shared content. It is phenomenal. The bandwidth that is used and the fidelity that you can get out of like text heavy slides over Zoom is nuts. And it's important to remember that we are now working in production world where that is getting rendered into a video stream. And the fidelity that Zoom has of video is also nuts. It is great. It's very fast. It is very quality. But one of the things that I want to make sure that everyone's aware of, especially power users like you guys, is making sure that you are thinking about it the way it is, in that you have content being mixed into a video feed and going out from there, and making sure that you're treating it with a little bit of respect for what you're doing and how you're doing it, and making sure that you're following some best practices there.
Good stuff. I have voting on the Q&A, but it doesn't look like voting's like being leveraged. So I'm going to jump down to the nearer the bottom of the list to some questions from Jan. Says how flexible can lower thirds be shown or hidden? Are they hard cut or also fade in and out possibly?
So these are the existing session branding name tags. So that's just no change in the way that name tags operate today. If you're familiar with session branding, that'll all be the same. These are not animated lower thirds. These are session branding name tags. Want to make that very clear.
So it always displays when you brand them, you color them, and so forth. You as a panelist come in. That's just simply the way it's going to display the name. There is no on or off independently for an individual panelist.
It's not a per scene property, if that is the question.
Gotcha. Yeah.
You have the ability to take a panelist and change their appearance to remove the tag. That's something you can do in panelist in session branding today. But yeah, like Andy said, it's not per scene. It's not automated. I would say it's only niche use cases that would be something I would be approaching. Functionally, the name tag is there.
Good stuff. Jan also asked, will there be some kind of media player to cut to pre-uploaded auto-starting videos?
Nothing about the way you share content is changing today, is my short answer of that. Production Studio is not overhauling that. Production Studio is overhauling the layouts and how people view the things that already exist in the Zoom webinar.
Yeah.
I already had shared content. The way I have it, I have video participants. Production Studio is just choosing who goes in what box and how many boxes do I have.
So I'm going to think a little deeper on this question. I'm going to guess, although I don't know that this is 100% accurate, but I'm going to guess that this question potentially comes from somebody, Jan, who uses the advanced video player, Share, which is a non-auto starting experience, right? So, I mean, people who have seen me demo it know when you say share, you've selected your file, you say share, get ready to slam that spacebar key, and it'll be much like an auto start, right? It's very quick. It's the biggest key on your keyboard. It's pretty easy to get going. But better than that, you've already described that if somebody's about to share a video, they can go ahead and go through that entire process. Share an advanced video player. It's the black screen initially, but it is shared. And so an admin's cut to the scene won't cause it to play. So would that be a coordinated effort at this point that says, hey, panelists, when you see this go live, hit play, or you hear the audio cue from the moderator that says, well, let's take a look at, you hit play, I'll cut, right? I mean, is that the best we're going to get right now?
There is
Which
a
is pretty
notification.
good.
There's a notification when a scene goes on air and that you're in. So you'll see that presumably, and then that would be sort of your signal.
Yep. So yeah,
Gotcha.
you have a new visual indicator and then the other methods, but it is a coordinated effort at the end of the day.
Okay.
Now, one thing I would throw out, and this is me going back to my production roots, but for something like that with Jan, one of the things I even debated doing it for the session on Wednesday, but we didn't, was the idea of, because advanced video share is the best way to share videos. That is the best quality way to share videos in Zoom natively. But an option you could do is something like actually the way that screen share worked a second ago is Aaron has an HDMI capture card set up and he's sharing from camera, which is why you saw him for a second there, because it made him switch to his camera as we're setting up today. But he's sharing through an HDMI in. So me personally, I definitely have shows where I would do something like take a QLab rig, put all my videos into that, use as my media server, and then that way I could have like my still store with a little looping video and then have it crossfade into my video. So instead of trying to time it out exactly right, when the admin took my production studio scene with my content and my presenter live, they could take that early while the MC is going and it says Zoom Test Kitchen has a little looping animation going across it. I say, let's watch the video. And then it cuts full screen and then it fades and the video actually starts. And I'm just doing that by having a screen share that's happening the whole time. And I'm just using a media player to choose when it changes from video A to video B.
Yeah. I work with a production company who kind of taught me that by example. They always, their first QLab media is that constantly looping, video. And if anything falls apart or is finished, that's where it rolls to. And so it's a really cool practice. Really, really smooth. John asks, will we get breakouts or similar in webinars? Which is an age old question.
It was a Zoomtopia announcement. I don't have any additional information on it today, but it is something that we announced that we were going to do as recently as our last Zoomtopia.
Yeah, actually, as far back as 2 Zoomtopias ago, if I remember correctly, but it's still on their mind. I mean, I'd rather have it be announced 2 years in a row than not be announced or talked about at all the second year, because then you're like, well, now it's not even on their mind anymore. So appreciate that. And all right, let's see. Do you foresee this being available in just webinar sometime?
We're not going to be able to speak to roadmap today and what our overall strategy will be with the feature. So I'll just leave it at the idea that Production Studio right now has a lot of synergies with Zoom Events itself, and you can see that in the speaker flow and the way that things are set up and the assets and a lot of the components of that. So we're leveraging the synergies with Zoom Events, I think, in a productive way for this release. And then for all your other types of sessions that are outside of Zoom Events, you have all the production tools we've been talking about for the past year and a half, the liminal tools, all the integrations from the developer platform. You have a wide plethora of things available to you to get the look and feel of Production Studio or something even beyond that with plenty of tools available. I think we're a leader in that area.
Yeah. No, I got to say, Andy, your and Jonathan's move to Zoom, it's not even been it's a year and a half, is it?
Hardly, yeah.
Yeah. Just going towards a year and a half, and the momentum in production at Zoom, as far as tools and solutions and so forth, is just fascinating.
Well, this is one of the things I'm so excited about with Production Studio is that it's a Zoom native feature, right? Like we've done a lot of interesting stuff with ZoomISO and the liminal apps. We've done a lot of interesting stuff with the developer platform, but all those have kind of felt like an arm's length away from core Zoom. And I think you can very clearly see in the way this is designed and the way that, Adam Tao and other leaders on my team and the way that, all that has come together and influenced. There are some key areas, some key corners in Production Studio where I think you can definitely feel the liminal story filling in those features, crafting the way that this is done. And I think that's going to be to great benefit for producers who are using the feature.
Yeah. A couple more questions from Bill. He says, if we have Zoom rooms with multiple monitors in the audience and you are doing a screen share, does it appear on the second monitor?
So the answer to that might be a little in flux and is going to depend on whether you're an attendee or a panelist, because the attendee side should see the produced view and the panelist side should have no change from today, where it sees shared content when shared content is shared and it sees multi-spotlight. And that would be a Zoom room layout that decides where those things go on the panelist side.
Yeah, that makes sense. Bill says, nice work. When creating this app, what persona are you designing for now and for the future? You touched on this, but curious to understand the long-term direction.
Yeah, I think the marketing agent at an enterprise company, they have a good eye for design, but they're not a vMix producer, right? They're non-technical. But we designed it in such a way that it has synergies with standards that are used in production, so that the act of learning this tool, while easier as an entry point, leads itself to other standards that if somebody is familiar with, standard AB program preview workflow, they're at home when they come see this tool. So there's, it's almost like a fusion of like OBS and PowerPoint in a certain sense of it, how it sits in the middle there where it's accessible. It leans into the design. It's designed to reduce the friction between idea to some actual tangible outcome. But it also leverages some of the lessons that we learn in production, right? Because production exists for a reason. And these are standards for a reason. They're designed to be highly repeatable, highly dependable, produce good results for audiences. So we took the lessons that we know from the production world and tried to apply them in such a way that is easy for that non-technical operator to be able to get some value out of this.
There's a YouTube question that asks, any plan for timers visible to the panelists only?
I think we would see that solved through Zoom apps, because they're just in a webinar together. They're in a webinar together. They have Zoom apps up. So all of those options that you have for various Zoom apps and everything, that's all happening there for them.
They're not filtered from that Zoom app experience, are they? Very good. I think John has, he says, so if a corporate has Zoom and wants a big production, I assume they need to get production on their account, and then we can go in and support them.
Yeah. So the workflow here would be, this is going to be a feature included with every Zoom Events and Zoom Sessions license. So on any Zoom Events, single session or multi-session that you schedule, once this goes GA, you have access to this. It's not its own feature. You just have it. It is only within Zoom Events, but you have it available on all of them. Once it goes GA, you set it up, and then Zoom Events already has options for alternative hosts that don't have to be on your account, or even co-editors that don't have to be on your account. So like the session that we ran on Wednesday, Aaron was my operator running Production Studio. He was logged in with a account on a completely different tenant from mine that I built it on. I built out, actually, I didn't even build it out. My marketing person had built the Zoom event. I was a co-editor for it, and then I made him a co-editor for it on a different account inside a different tenant. Had nothing to do with my company. So it could have been anyone on this meeting. / I could have assigned anyone as an alt host. Whoever has the host inside of that meeting is the ability to run it. So this is actually really, really great for these third-party producers, that if you're working with a customer that has a Zoom Events license, they can just say, great, I'm gonna add you as a co-host, make it happen.
Good stuff. Anybody in the meeting that hasn't typed a question, that may have a question, feel free to chime in or raise a digital hand or whatever, however you'd like to approach. I think we're wrapping towards the latter part of this presentation and share. My brain is full for sure.
Jeff, we've got a question in the comments. Can you think of a scenario in which Zoom Production Studio and vMix or similar software would work together?
I can think of a scenario, and it sounds really awesome. That's my answer.
More to come, my friends.
Yeah.
But in seriousness, though, like there could be some use cases where if you have Production Studio is creating the output for the digital audience primarily, but if you needed to modify it in a certain way, shape, or form for displaying in a physical space, for example, there could be use for sort of edits on top of edits. But as part of a core workflow, I wouldn't want to do a switcher on top of a switcher, if that makes sense. But I do think there could be some repackaging tasks that could be helpful for for using Production Studio within another type of switcher.
Well, I think playback as well, right? I mean, we talked about the inclusion and layouts of sharing, but fact is if if my video was a virtual input and it was the output of vMix, and vMix was capturing all my slide decks for my panelists here and all the video playback there and so forth, I can just master the playback, and the tech, whoever's cutting the show just knows to cut to my camera during one of those moments, whether it's slides or video, but or QLab or whatever, right? I just think it would be, it's that so it's interesting to me in the real world, in the sense where you ask some people for their decks and they just won't, and it's never, but seldom is it an intellectual property argument. It's just, they don't want to let them go. They don't want to not be in control. And it's but when you're in control, it's a crappy experience for the audience, because there's just too many risks involved. I'm trying to make it easier on you. Well, you're here to present. Just focus on presenting, right? I can share faster. I can get it queued up faster, all those things, right? And so anytime we can collect and centralize, those points of sharing or feeding them through a virtual input, I welcome it for sure. Robert.
Yeah, I don't know, Andy or Sam, could you just talk about the role of the Stream Deck now with the production studio?
So Production Studio right now is designed as a simple Zoom native interface. It's very mouse driven, and that's kind of where it's living at the moment, is for not this group, but for just anyone to be able to download Zoom and run it the way they know how they run things, which is with the mouse. That said, it is definitely a lot faster getting around than spotlighting is today in the Zoom interface, where I'm having to go and spotlight my people from the 3-dot menu and stuff, because I have those pre-assigned scenes. I have the ability to have my speakers already set in them. I have that drag and drop nature. It makes it actually, I don't know. That's a question that I was asking a lot early on and stopped asking once I actually started using it, and realized that as a production person, honestly, it's really easy to get around. It functions really well. And I think that's kind of like going to the persona question. It's working towards a persona of those marketers, those people who we keep saying a non-technical person can run it, but a technical person is going to have a really great experience running it, because it's going to be easy. That's the thing, is the more technical you are, the easier it is for you to do something that even a non-technical can do.
Think about the work required to achieve the outcome that you're targeting, right? So Production Studio now gives you a user interface element where, to achieve the result of what that would have required Stream Decks and vMix and ISO and all that other stuff, right? And now that's available as an interface that's custom built, right, for production. This is one of the things that's nice about it. It's a pop-out window. You're not trying to sit there in the midst and in competition with all the other features that Zoom has available for managing the meeting. It's a separate pane of glass that you're interacting with that was built from the ground up to be efficient for managing the production. So in that sense, right, I think a lot of what the Stream Deck and ZoomOSC and the companion module try to alleviate is that navigation through this really multi-purpose tool that is the Zoom meeting client. But when you step away from that into Production Studio and you have a dedicated interface, I think you'll find that you can navigate it very efficiently without the need to break it out to hardware peripherals.
And I haven't tried Production Studio on a large touchscreen, but maybe somebody will try that out one day. We're not building it for touch devices, but I'm sure somebody will figure out how to drag and drop and make things work with a nice touchscreen, just as an idea.
So if you'll spotlight me, that totally contradicts my class I did a week or so ago. Mouseless meeting management, man. I'm telling you, it's a thing.
So Jeff, it's totally different, because this is webinars only.
Yeah, no, it's totally true. I mean, it's if we had webinars, I think likens it to, I'm going to jump into the alignment of ZoomOSC and groups and so forth. Webinars gets us to groups immediately. It's called the Panelist, right? It's a fraction of the entire audience there, and so that certainly helps. But even to be able to just have some awareness of that layout template and be able to plug, change, assign this person to that output in the ZoomISO terms, right? To be able to plug people in that way. And the difference between a mouse and a button is, I describe it simply as this: it's the target size that matters. And, when my target sizes are all the same and they're right next to each other and they're this far above and below each other, called a stream deck, it makes all the difference in the world versus, these small 3-dot ellipses or right clicking on a video and so forth. So it's really more about target size.
Right.
And inside Zoom, even assigning people co-hosts with my mouse today was a total pain in the butt, because there were a bunch of, we let everybody in early, and I have a lot of co-hosts today, and to be able to right click on somebody and not have them move just within that, fraction of a moment, because there's so much adjustment, right, in the participants list. I wish there was a way to freeze the participants list, quite honestly, at times.
I was going to say that, the Production Studio user interface is not designed to be a meeting management interface. And if you look at the way it's designed, it is those large buttons, a giant blue send live button, the video tiles that you literally drag into the locations where you want to pull them, a big scene list on the left-hand side that you're clicking on without high precision. We're not talking about, drop-down menus and dots to get things assigned here, right? So it really, really is designed to be more of an ergonomic experience, again, because it's focused on just the production component. It's a separate window, right? It can live alongside a client. It can live alongside of the Stream Deck doing the meeting management tasks, the co-host delegation, the automatic chat messages, all that stuff. And it can all live side by side. Again, it's the beauty of an ecosystem play here. But the Production Studio user interface and all the things that happen within that, think about a scene like you think about groups in your Stream Deck, right? And what's beautiful about scenes in Production Studio is you can assign them ahead of time. As soon as you've decided who the speakers are, that whole on stage thing that you're building in the Stream Deck, that's essentially what you're doing when you're building a scene in Production Studio. You're saying, I want these people in these locations, in this order, and I'm going to hit one button and send that on air. And that's what's happening inside of Production Studio, right? So it's
I'll add one point to that, with the benefit of, I love weird words. It removes the splat approach, multi-spotlighting with a Stream Deck and ZoomOSC is a total splat. You can't go one splat and get all four, and I don't know how you guys are doing it. I'm assuming it's because it's a native tool, and you're just that much closer to the code and so forth. But I'm assuming it doesn't include that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or whatnot. That we can't beat that in groups and so forth. So no, I see some huge benefit. Is there any reason why a good quality touchscreen wouldn't work with this?
have to be tested, but I don't see why not.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Be an interesting test. I think, with the bigger buttons and so forth, to be able to, do that, it sounds like a project worth taking on.
Yeah, I just keep going back to each one of my operators has 79 Stream Deck buttons. I went and added it up while you were talking. 79 Stream Deck buttons and a fader controller in front of them every day. And we're pretty happy with how this gets around. Like it gets me where I need to be. It does it. It's nice. I'm not wanting at this point, which I think I did start also desperately asking, like, no, I need buttons. I need APIs. I need to talk with Companion.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't.
No, that's good. That's a really powerful testimony. I mean, because you are somebody who's, leveraged ISO and OSC and Stream Decks and Companion and so forth. And to be able to, be convicted that I really haven't missed that while working in this tool is really powerful. So that's good stuff. Yeah. And we can't, a couple articles, 2 or 3 articles ago, it's like, Zoom, how the heck you doing this? And it was about the rapid development schedule that the organization, is on and the release schedule, as frequent as the release schedule is and so forth, it continues to be pretty amazing. I mean, Zoomtopia was was in November, right? And it's only May 5th. I mean, it's still first half of the year, and I haven't actually taken an audit of all the announcements back then. I should go back in that article and look, but so many came pretty quickly that this one feels late, but it's not. It's still just doing great. Hitting. I mean, at least we're seeing it, talking about it, demoing it. It's not released yet, but in first half, and so it's pretty doggone impressive how much continues to get done. And really what we don't know is what you haven't been able to say today. All the stuff that's still, being worked on and developed and tested and so forth. It's exciting as heck. So, hey, David.
Hey, before I ask my question, John was asking in the chat, and you addressed this in the in your session the other day, but how do you get the sign interpreter up on the screen?
Yeah, David knows that because he was my first attendee on. He joined like 30 minutes early when we opened it with pre-show. But yeah, sign language interpreter, in my opinion, you don't. Functionally, I could have a sign language interpreter as a panelist and I could put them on there. But in my opinion, you don't put your interpreter on there because Zoom's ASL interpretation feature is better. It allows the people who need it to pop that window open, make it as big as they want on the screen, put it where they want, make it forefront. Because if this is how I'm understanding the conversation, this is the language that I'm conversating with, is that ASL interpreter, then that is what is most important to me. And the visuals are secondary. And that's how it should be produced. No one has ever produced a show where they put the ASL interpreter in the video and actually gave it priority. Unless your audience is primarily needing it. Let's be honest. You make it a small box in the corner, and now it's not big enough for them to get what they need. And the other audience that may not need it, it's taking away your real estate that they need to see and the way they need to witness it. And Zoom's ASL interpretation feature fixes that because it lets everyone, like the other things in Zoom, be adaptive and change and let the attendee make the choice that they need for them. So that's my impression of it. You could make them a panelist and put them in one of the boxes all you want. But I think you don't actually put them on screen. You use the native feature because, again, this is Zoom native. Everything about this is Zoom. And I think you've heard a couple times our answers have been, well, how would I do this thing? And the answer is the same way you already do. Nothing actually has to change here. That's the beauty of this. Unlike production where I had to change your world and teach you how to do something new, this is just a tack on that lets you have this great thing without having to change how else you do things.
So if a viewer had dual monitors, on one monitor they could see the production studio output, and on the other one they could move that ASL floating window and full screen that, right, and have both in front of them, so they really didn't miss anything. That would be
Absolutely.
Great.
Right.
Yeah.
So if it's okay, my second question, or my question, was a little more philosophical. Andy, you talked about the synergies between Zoom Events and Production Studio. And I understand that by adding Production Studio to Zoom Events, it's giving Zoom Events a leg up over over the competition. As someone who has struggled with Zoom Events in the past, and that's on me, I don't blame anyone except me, but also who works with a lot of smaller organizations who maybe aren't ready to pay for Zoom Events, I'm wondering about the thinking behind limiting it to Zoom Events. Without asking you to give away anything for the future, it seems like this would really be something that's just huge for webinars and for me, even for meetings, but I'm a freak in that respect. I'm curious about the thinking behind putting it only in events, I guess.
Yeah, I can't speak to the product roadmap, as you know, but what I can say is that what we're showing right now ties into a lot of how Zoom Events is set up and structured. It's designed to sit on top of that. That's not to say, what our limits are or aren't, or what our strategy is or isn't. But Zoom Events is the most natural place for this to live to start, right? And it's because everything else sort of wraps around the experience all the way from the pre-event planning to the post-event analytics. This is slotting in the in-event production component that Zoom Events, in my opinion, is always needed. We talked about that all the way back at the liminal announcements, was that we wanted to build a platform that was start to finish what you needed to put an event together. And this is, I felt the key missing component was those production-based features. And I don't think I can't get into what the overall strategy for the entire market segment will be. But we also understand, and I've said this before, that production is just a sort of a manifestation of personalization and customization, right? And it expresses itself in different ways in different verticals, right? So customization as personalization, something that shows up maybe in the sense of meetings and how I prepare my own personal space. Customization shows up as production when I have an audience and I want to control the way that they see and experience things. And so I think the root of this, which is the customization layer, is something that's been built at the client level, right? And I think there's a lot of amazing things that can happen when we have the capabilities that we build for Production Studio. What does it look like to have a more customized experience across the entire product wheel, right? And those are things that I think again and again, Zoom will sort of double dip on its own engineering, its own capabilities. And I think that, these are now capabilities of Zoom itself, and there'll be, interesting things that can come from there.
I think also I have had a lot of different events where we've been looking for, like, where we look at, hey, should we move this to Zoom Events? And a lot of the time, for all the things that Zoom Events brings, because there's a ton of different things that Zoom Events brings that just there's not another way to do it. And you've heard me say that time and time again across multi-sessions, expo, lobbies, these different things it has. And then you take your little single session event that doesn't need registration, and doesn't need ticketing, and doesn't have monetization, and doesn't need it. And I've been sitting there going, cool, there's no reason for this to move to Zoom Events. Now there's a reason. Now there actually is something that says, hey, guess what? It's time. Now Zoom Events really brings something else to the table that doesn't live anywhere else. On the pricing angle, you mentioned like the smaller companies that aren't ready to go in on a Zoom Events license. And that's where I think the pay per attendee model that recently launched on Zoom Events is a great asset to have that flexibility between whether you need to do a lot of it. Like, there's tremendous value in how many events you could run if you're running constant events with a perpetual annual license, or an unlimited license as it's called, or doing pay per attendee if I only need it once a year and I don't want to have a big annual contract. I just need to get in, do my show, and get out. And pay per attendee is a great model to do that. Pay per attendee licenses will be able to use Production Studio because they get access to Zoom Events.
And sessions as well. Just to be clear, we say Zoom Events, but Zoom Events and Zoom Sessions, both those license types are completely valid to use with Production Studio. So there is that other entry point, more affordable entry point. Again, you can see sort of how strategically the Zoom Events licensing structure, sort of restructure from earlier in the year. Now some additional value add within the Zoom Events area. I hope that would alleviate some of the friction in terms of getting started with events or sessions, and that it'll be easier to get your hands on these features than it would have been in the past.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Jeff, if it's okay, Robert has a question.
Yes, sir.
I'm just totally impressed by what you guys are saying. It sounds like really, really easy and straightforward to run webinars with all of the simple production processes that you've talked about. I'm assuming all of the interpretation isn't affected in any way. I'm talking about simultaneous interpretation. Could I just get a confirmation from you guys?
I have not directly tested, but I am thinking through all the various cases that I have tested, and I cannot think of anything that would possibly affect it. Andy?
Speaking from the design side, there's no intentional changes that are being announced as part of this, so I'm not aware of any impact.
Okay, and when it comes to streaming, will the stream going out be exactly what the attendees see, or is that
Yes.
changing?
Yes. Very, very important. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Perfect. Lovely. Thank you. Great job. Brilliant. Can't wait to get my hands on this.
Yeah, agreed. It it's a big addition for sure, and brings a lot of possibilities to I mean, even those articles of Zoom fatigue, right? It's like, hey, I mean, this is a tool that can just battle that argument. I mean, the article I wrote yesterday, the opening paragraph included that I say Zoom, you probably think or envision that boring layout of multiple videos. I mean, it's just what and we've been staring at it for 3 years strong, right? When it got really, really popular, and so it just there is nothing different, right? I mean, except the count of how many, but this at least brings wallpapers and labels with name tags with company colors and and sizing and cropping and borders, and it's like it's simple things. When you name them bullet by bullet by bullet, it just seems so trivial in a sense, but when you combine it all together, along with the experience that they have been predefined and pre-built, therefore the switching experience is smooth and seamless and non-interruptive to the audience and so forth, and the challenges that it's eliminating in the audio workflow, right? I mean, having speakers join a separate meeting and all the audio challenges that come with that, as long as what Production Studio can produce satisfies the customer's requirements, it's an easy decision, and if it can't, then all of us production people are still in business, and that's just not going to be a problem. But because there's certainly things that go beyond, like you said earlier in the program. But needless to say, congratulations to all of you that are here and can hear that, and thank you for all your hard work. Please go back and share it with your team members, the Adams and of the like. That
I'd love to thank a few just by name. On the product side, I'm very appreciative of the work of Annika and Amina before her, and Wei, of course, head of Zoom events. And then on our engineering side, Adam, my kind of partner in crime, is subject matter expert and product counsel for Production Studio. And then, of course, engineering leaders, Gino and Brace and Alex, and of course, Sam and Jonathan and the event services team for their input on this as well. It really has been a team effort from across a bunch of different angles, trying to balance a lot of requirements simultaneously. And I think everybody's come together and done a great job at that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's important to recognize those that have put in just a ton of time and work and thought, and don't really care about the camera probably as much as being seen, but being able to see their work get out there and be used and appreciated. So anyways, I think that's a wrap. Anybody else real quick?
There's another question from John in here. How will you notify when it's released, and it does not need, a Zoom update?
Well, we should, just to clarify, the update component was in reference to the ability to watch Production Studio and subscribe to that mixed audio and mixed video feed. There may still be requirements of client version yet to be determined. And of course, those will be communicated. They'll be in the release notes. You will know when Production Studio is available. Don't worry, that'll be abundantly clear. But yeah, no, the point was that attendees, if they don't all have the latest Zoom client version, whatever it is at the point when we release Production Studio to everybody, it'll be okay, because all the way back to, I think, December, January, sometime in there, those clients are ready to go. And then for those who are on older versions, they're going to see a multi-spotlight as well. So there's all these different levels of the experience rolling all the way back through time. So it's been carefully crafted in that way. But yeah, well, you'll know.
Now the host itself, I'm assuming, would be one of those required latest clients, wouldn't it? I mean, since
Yeah,
they're
the host
processing things.
version is what's going to be important
Yeah.
because they're what they can do visually, and those capabilities are going to be a function of their client version. So that'll all be communicated out, when the release happens, so that what you need to do.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, everybody from Zoom, thanks for your work. Thanks for your relaxed time here today. I've always appreciated not having to, cram a lot into a little bit of, limited time, that you've always come here with, a flexible tail on the clock at the end to be able to. I don't think we've ever gone with a question unanswered. So I really, really appreciate that give from all of you. And, everybody else, I know we've had some people tailing off, but needless to say, we're almost at 2 hours, 10 minutes shy of 2 hours. So we've put in our time. This it's been live streamed to YouTube and will be replayable there. Also, our Discord channel. As soon as we end this meeting, we'll send a bot-driven announcement of where the recording is delivered from Zoom as well. And that's kind of cool because it adds the captions and the full transcript and all that. If you want to see it that way, it's actually a really good viewer. So pick your passion there. That's on our Discord channel. But let's put a tail on this program. You don't have to leave, but I'm going to end it for the YouTube recording, and I'll be right back.
Thank you guys so much. That was awesome.
No, pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. That was great. Brilliant.
Turned off your original, Jeff.
Cool. If we're no
Thanks again,